Welcome to Eli's Loft.
And Eli is?
That horse that's flying up there on the wall over there, he wasn't originally Eli. He's a carousel horse that used to hang in our old house in Mississauga, and I'd cut his legs off and hung him on the wall, and I painted him, and he had an E for Emmett. And then one day I was looking at him and I went, no, Elijah was the prophet in the Old Testament that got to, he's the only guy that got to go to heaven still alive. According to the story, he got in a golden chariot that was on fire and off he went. And so I was looking at the horse and I was thinking, this is my horse that, that takes me on my chariot off to Wonderland. So anyways, he became Eli the Wonder Horse, and he's been Eli ever since. And I sit here alone by myself working away, and every now and then I look up at him and I go, what the fuck should I do? Hey, Eli, what the hell should I do? So, he just kind of looks at me going, laughing at me. I go, you figure it out on your own. That's how it works.
Very good. Tell me about the new album. Tell me about the new book, 10 Telecaster Tales.
Yes. It started out with this guitar, and this is Babs. So I was designing this with a friend of mine, Mike Smitty Smith of MJS Pickups. And then we had a guy in Oakville, Ontario, Garen DeKessian, and Garen helped us build it. And it took us over a year. We were fiddling around and doing different things. And I was writing pieces. This was all being renovated. This house, we were living in a barn at an old century home in downtown Burlington, and Airbnb kind of a thing. And I was writing pieces, and then I thought, geez, maybe I could do all the pieces on this guitar when I finally get it. I record them, and one thing led to another, and then I had a deal with ECW Press because I'd done a book of poetry and done a memoir, and so then I said to my editor, who happens to be a guitar player, everybody's a guitar player, you're a guitar player.
Of sorts.
Yeah, okay. So I said to him, hey, I'm thinking about maybe writing like liner notes that would become so voluminous they would become a book. So I would have a book about the guitar pieces, about this guitar, about the history of Telecasters, blah, blah, blah. He went, love it, let's do it. So one thing led to another, and I cut it down to 10 pieces, and I had these 10 things, and recorded them here, and with a friend of mine, Blair Packham Engineering, and wrote a book about it.
You have gotten back in the many years since you left Triumph to more the kind of person you used to be before you were in Triumph, which is a guy who does everything.
Well, not everything, but some things.
So in high school, you were a jock.
Yes.
You were, maybe not still in high school, but at some point you were in the church choir.
Oh, wait, yeah, even before. That was the first thing. First thing's like, 7 years old, and my mom dragged me off to the United Church, and I was a first soprano, boy soprano. But I sang in the Kiwanis Festival a couple of years at Massey Hall. I was a singer, and then I got a guitar, and then I started becoming a songwriter, and those are the sort of the three pillars of what I am. But the writing is the foundational thing. Singing was always the thing that connected me to an audience more than anything. And then the guitar became sort of the passport to the universe, So that's kind of how it all played out. But yes, before I was in Triumph, I played coffee houses, and I played in Jewish wedding and bar mitzvah bands, and when I got my union card and stuff, when I was still 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
So, I had a pretty varied kind of background. And then, yes, as Triumph was, it wasn't singularly focused, but it was narrowly focused, to be a commercial hard rock, extravaganza, And my sensibilities are much smaller scale than that, I like playing jazz guitar stuff. I like playing classical guitar things. I'm not good at any of it, but I can pass,
So one of the things, look, let me tell you about me and Triumph, which is that I ignored Triumph.
As many did.
Your years in Triumph were basically my high school and most of my university years.
Uh-huh.
And I sure heard about, I was pretty big Rush fan.
Yes.
And then I was trying to figure out how to play jazz and classical music. I sure heard about Triumph from all of my friends. Whenever you were in Toronto or Detroit, my friends in Sarnia would go and check it out, and they would come back. And the ones who could play would play Rik Emmett stuff.
Right.
So, but you've been out of the band forever. And one of the things as I was learning about you was learning your relationship at the time and since then. And I get the strong impression that you were hired by the two older guys in the band to play a role. And you had to select from among the many things you were interested in doing to do the things that would work in Triumph.
Yes.
It was a gig.
It was. And it was a professional relationship between three partners right from the get-go. So it wasn't like we were kids together dreaming dreams and, we were already sort of established working musicians on some level, and then it was like, okay, this is going to be, our attempt to crack the big time, and yeah. But having said that, there's nothing that I do in my life where I don't go, how can I make this be something where I'm proud of it? Where there's some integrity to what I'm doing, some sort of substantial value or depth, It was a tough fight in the early stages with the other guys to try and get myself in there. But by, say, 1979, 4 years after I'd been in it, that was the album, I think, where I sort of forced my way, into the spotlight. And we had some hits, got on the radio with our own material and things. And I look at it as the thing of, they'd called the band Triumph, but there wasn't anything really triumphant about it, the way that they envisioned it, until we had songs like Lay It on the Line and Hold On to Your Dreams and Fight the Good Fight and Never Surrender. Now there was this integrity to what the band was trying to be, and it helped set us apart from the other bands that were like Studs and Leather and Harley's on stage, and it's like, yeah, so.
Early on in your autobiography, you talk about how as the band gets closer and closer to the stage, it spends more and more time going through people who are working class, maintenance crews and techs and concession stand people. And did that ground you as you were playing in bigger and bigger venues?
Yeah, my understanding is that you have a sort of a political background, and so the way that politics always worked for me was that I felt there a liberal kind of leaning to the fact that I was making something that purportedly there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to buy tickets and a lot of money's going to be made for a lot of folks, but. Fundamentally, I'm supposed to give those folks something that money can't buy, which is this thing about integrity and value, and so that was always the most important thing to me. I didn't want to get lost in the mechanics of the economics of the blah blah blah. Like, I still wanted to just have something that was, and I used to tell students all the time, straight at them. You're not working down to them, you're not working up to them, you're working straight at people. You're going to be honest, So that was always a big thing for me. And my partners, initially there was some, butting of heads. Then it was like, no, they embraced that and it worked out. And of course now the legacy of the band is such that these things, they still work, Rogers and Sportsnet is doing Lay It on the Line as a song behind the hockey broadcasts because there's a real thing there I had a lady say to me the other day, oh, Lay It on the Line, that's, because hockey, because the goal lines and I'm going, yeah.
Arguably, maybe, but...
Yeah, and I go, I didn't invent the cliche. The cliche was there, and I just sort of took advantage of it when I was writing lyrics.
Your autobiography, Lay It on the Line, is 20 chapters, 12 chapters. There's one chapter about Triumph. It's called the Triumph chapter. And as a reader, what's really striking is you're talking about the stuff of musicianship, learning your craft, companionship with colleagues, until you get to the Triumph chapter, and suddenly there's an awful lot about contracts, about royalties, about the pressure of a big record contract, and in the end, that's what puts paid to your time in Triumph. It was heavy, and music shouldn't be. Is that right?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't think, pick the most esoteric folk singer that you can think of. And at a certain point in time, their career is going to turn into that heaviness. There's no way to escape it. The fact of the Triumph chapter being, compartmentalized is because I wanted to make that point about my life, but all of that heaviness that you talk about, I wanted my book to be about things that weren't gossipy, that weren't, all about business. So this was a way to sort of say, okay, well, I can cover the things that, the growth of, every documentary that ever got done about rock bands is like the rise and the fall, and the phoenix comes out of the ashes, So it's like, that has happened with Triumph too, because it's a story that's ongoing.
I've got a question about the very early days of that band, and then a little bit about the prehistory. The early days are, success comes fairly quickly and you're playing in larger venues. And you talk about Maple Leaf Gardens and San Antonio, and you talk with real reverence about Detroit, which tugs my heartstrings because I grew up in Sarnia, and right. Detroit matters a lot to a Southern Ontario kid.
Yes.
It must have been just a huge rush to go from 400 seat to 800 seat to 12,000 seat venues.
Yes.
It must have been a blast to see a crowd of that size responding.
Yes. I will modify that by saying, when you're inside the rocket ship, or a better metaphor would be you're on this roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And you're just riding the roller coaster. You're not going, isn't this something I should really think about that? Well, here's something. It's happening fast. And it's happening at a pace that you can't possibly understand what's going on. You're just trying to sort of deal with what you got going. But to your point about Detroit, there was this really nice thing where we're a Canadian band, and we're looking at the fact that, you can go across the border and every dollar you earn, you're getting another 25 or 30% on the dollar. And we were trying to crack Buffalo. And then the Detroit thing, I think it happened because of airplay. I think there were a couple of radio riff maybe. And so we could go there, and Triumph had a kind of a sneaky proposition about how to break. And that was, don't go and open for other bands. Haul your own PA and your own lights and your own roadies and trucks and play shows, even if you got to play a smaller place. And I'm trying to think, was it the Royal Oak? Was there a place in Detroit that was called the Royal Oak Theater?
Well, I think there's a suburb of Detroit called Royal Oak, Michigan,
which
has...
that was one of the first places we played. Yeah. And the people just went, it was really good. It was like this, when you make a solid connection to an audience and you know that they're with you, and you go, and there's a lot of reasons for that. If radio is playing your stuff, then you're going to have these surefire things that at some point in the set you're going to play the opening riff to Rocky Mountain Way and or Magic Power or whatever, and people are going to go And we always kind of had that with Detroit. Plus, Detroit was this place. Back to my own youth, Motown and it had musical history, and there were Ted Nugent, the Motor City Madman, Yeah.
Seeger, and one thing I learned early is that if a band was touring and they were going to be in Toronto or in Detroit, you could get to either from Sarnia. If you had a chance, you would go to Detroit. Yeah. Because the audience knew what it was doing in Detroit.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. Plus, there were legendary places like Cobo, where you'd heard about them, and now you're going to get to play them, Like, I will never forget the feeling of walking out on stage at Joe Louis Arena, which was, relatively almost brand new when we first played it. and now they've knocked it down, which, boy, does that make you feel old, when the real estate is gone. Anyhow, but we walked on a stage and they all flicked their bics, so it was just like you're looking at, a picture of the universe, it's just, it's a star field, and you go, okay, this is pretty cool, yeah.
Now, let's jump forward to current events. Actually, the people who knew you from Triumph will have questions about all the time since then, which you've been out of Triumph for 4 times as long as you were in.
Yes.
And you had a solo career during which you mostly just entertained your whims. And your solo career has had a bunch of different shapes.
That is true. Stages, yes. Yeah. And not initially. When I left Triumph, I still wanted to be a rock star and still wanted to, but slowly but surely, the mainstream was kind of going like, you're over 40, man. Yeah. Like we don't really, and then of course the whole thing happened with grunge and Nirvana and Soundgarden and Stone Temple Pilots and all of that stuff. And it was like radio kind of went, we don't want you anymore, And so you kind of go, okay, well, I don't want to have to give up music, So, you figure out ways to survive, ways to evolve, ways to morph and mutate, But I think that's probably true of every human experience. As you live and you get older, you have to adjust. So, a lot of it is that. I will say this about the way you framed the question. I will never not be in Triumph. Like once I decided, okay, I've got to make amends with these guys. I've got to figure out, I've got to go through this whole thing of forgiveness and reunite. So we did all of that, and there's a tribute album that's coming out in a couple of weeks, and now I'm doing promo as part and parcel of it, and this Hockey Night in Canada thing that I mentioned, it's an ongoing thing, and so there's always this stuff, and it's like, yes, I'm doing my own thing, but then there's also this trying thing, and everything kind of helps everything else, so I go, okay, I'm in, and it is a lovely thing to be on brotherly kinds of speaking terms with the guys that I was in a foxhole with, like that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Okay. Now give the folks who are watching this a guitar lesson. When some friends asked you to design a guitar, why did the guitar look like a Fender Telecaster? Tell me about that platform.
I'm 5'8" and shrinking. And as I get older, I went and they did a thing, they measured me, and they go, no, you're not 5'8", you're 5'7". I go, oh, I am, eh? I go, oh, okay. So I like guitars to be light. So, but because of my size, when this rests on my thigh, the strings are right where I like them with a Tele. And if I did this with a Les Paul, they're a little bit lower. And so it's this thing, it's the weight of it, it's the proportion of it that makes the Tele. They got it right in 1949 when they were going, here, what do you think of this? Leo wasn't a guitar player, Leo Fender, but he had enough guys that were around that he'd say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? So this shape was a pretty good shape, pretty good size. Now, your average Tele has solidness around its edge. This is beveled, and I beveled this for my belly. But Fender now does this on their Teles too. So this is not, groundbreaking. But for this guitar, it was like, that's what I wanted. This is all chambered swamp ash. But this is maple. That's the way Fender originally did them. 6 on a side headstock. That's the way Fender did them.
It really is the finest 1951 technology. Like, I've heard it described as wood with a piece of wood. And in the classic incarnation, the circuitry that transforms the vibration to electric signals is like you could almost make it with a tin can. Like, it really is.
And in fact, done so that you can do it on an assembly line. So there's a 1950s kind of assembly line thinking that went into it. So the difference between a Fender Telecaster and this one is that this bridge and these pickups and this scale length, it's all Gibson Les Paul. So I was taking it's 24 and 3/4 inches as opposed to 25 and a half. So Fenders are a little bit longer. It makes them a little more twangy, makes them a little bit more high end, and whereas a Gibson is more of a kind of a rich, warm, and also based on the thing of a violin, which would have a big high arched bridge, neck set at an angle, headstock going off at an angle, which I like. I like all that. I got a bunch of Les Pauls here, So, and if I was in a rock band, that would be my choice. But when I'm getting older and deciding I want to try to combine fingerstyle, jazz, classical, flamenco, I want one guitar. I want a holy grail, one guitar to do them all. It's impossible, but this is as close as I could get within the last couple of years, coming up with a design. So if I had it to do again, I would not run the strings this far back. I would have a wraparound bridge. There's things that I would do a little bit different. But essentially, this is it. This is, this will work for me. My theory about creativity is that everything in life is kind of like Ty Cobb and batters in baseball. So .367 is Ty Cobb's lifetime batting average, greatest batting average of all time. So, roughly, 6 out of 10, they're going in the garbage. It's no good. You didn't get a hit, And in fact, if you just get 3 out of 10, you can make it to the Hall of Fame. 3 out of 10. So that's, from a creative point of view, you just got to be used to the idea that most of it's going into the garbage. Anyway, so some of the stuff survived, and I had a barn dance suite, and I had some pieces. And would you like to hear one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How's that for a lead-in? So this was a thing, and the reason I want to play this for you is because I went and played a couple of live gigs. I thought I'd retired, but apparently not. 7 years after the fact, I went and played a couple of shows at the Redwood in Toronto. And when I played it, the road manager that I brought up from New Jersey to work the gig with me, Kathy Wagner, she really liked the song. And then my wife came to the first night, and she really liked this piece. It was her favorite. So I went, okay, well, when I do the thing with Paul, I'm going to have to play this one. So it's called Swirling, and it's in a 6/8 kind of feeling. So to me, it's like the flowing of a river and the swirling of eddies, and that's kind of where it's at in my head as I was putting it together, thus swirling. So it's going to start with a little...
That's fun.
Thank you. Yes, it is. At the age of almost 72, to be able to still figure out a way to do it, it's like, it's good. I'm happy.
Do you get a kick out of how there will be fewer and fewer people who are just going to come straight at you expecting you to sound like Triumph, but the ones who do, you're throwing them quite a curveball with a piece like that.
Yeah, but you got to realize there's almost a 50-year process, 40-year process here where a lot of those folks, they came with me all the way through. And so when I'm playing a live show at the Redwood, I played all 10 Telecaster Tales as the first set. Just by myself, sat down, played the 10 things. And for a lot of those folks, it's the first time they ever heard them, But they want to let me indulge myself. They've been with me all the way through. So that's a pretty lovely, generous kind of a circumstance to have. So, yeah, there we go. So this was one of the places where 10 Telecaster Tales started. I mean, there's a lot of inception points, but this was one about sound. So I had gotten a couple of pedals, and one of them was a pedal that could allow a guitar to sort of sound like a Fender Rhodes piano. Okay. So it would have this wah, 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 wah kind of sound to it. Very famous sound, thousands of people have used it in recordings. This is called Slinky, and it's because it reminds me of when I was a kid, there were songs like Sunny and Stormy and Spooky. And when I came up with the riff of this, which is, I went, oh, that's like Stormy. So I called it Slinky because it does have a kind of a vibe of the way the toy went down the stairs.
That's got a lot more of them jazz chords in it.
Yes, it does. My head is often in a place of chords that have passing chords that have alterations to chords. I put chords on top of chords. It's kind of the way my brain works now.
It just gets a richer sound.
Yeah, and for this project, like a piece like this one, you know, when you play a chord like this, it's got a 9 in the, it's got these right beside each other. But I mean, it's not like I haven't used these, lay it on the line head. It had the same chord. This is one of my favorite chords. It's almost every song I write has this A minor 9 in it.
Your first Telecaster, you bought it from Long and McQuaid in 1971 for $250. I feel like that was serious money back then.
It kind of was. Plus, you had to have an amp, and the amp was $250 kind of. So you were like $500. But I had a theory with other musicians at the time. Why was the keyboard player kind of nuts? In every band, keyboard players were kind of the nutty professors.
That checks out in the bands that I was in.
Because they had to buy a B3, a Leslie, and then a truck to lug it around in. So those guys, their debt was, so they were, you know, freaking out because of their debt. Well, plus they were probably the guys in the band that had the most music education, you know, conservatory trained, piano lessons, stuff. So they were also the guys that were the most, you know, disciplined in their mind. And the rock band is trying to put stuff together, and they're going, you guys, you have no discipline, you know. So there would be that tension.
Do you remember the first time you decided, or you had a glimmer that a guitar might be more than a hobby? It might be someplace that you could find your whole life in?
I would say, you know, I mean, I've written my memoir. I've done hundreds of thousands of interviews, and people are always asking for watershed moments, you know, the Malcolm Gladwell tipping points. Yeah. So I was playing high school football, and I got blindside blocked by a guy from Danforth Tech, and he tore up my right knee, and you know, no more ACL, badly stretched MCL, you know, cartilage damage. It was just, you know, and kind of, that was like the end of the dream of a 17-year-old kid thinking, maybe someday I'll play for the Argos, you know, like it was over. But I had been playing guitar all along, and now it was kind of like, I don't want to have to work for a living. You know, I want to play. So I'm going to play music. That's what I'll play. And that was what led to the buying of the Tele and the amp and the getting of the union card and the, you know, sitting in with my friend Chet Paskowski with his uncle's polka band. And yeah, so, you know, that was the change where I was going, I'm going to get serious about this. I'm going to woodshed. I'm going to see if I can't become a much better, not just guitar player, but a much better musician, a much better writer. You know, I want to try and be writing music more often and coming up with that stuff. I was already the guy that when the high school was having its talent night, and there would be, say, female folk singers that they weren't very good at playing their guitar, but they were great singers. And so it'd be like, well, I'll help you out. I'll back you up and I'll do that. So I would be already doing things where I was kind of taking on responsibilities with other musicians. And so one thing led to another.
Okay. Thank you for this conversation.
You're welcome.